what do all those symbols mean, and what does AC, MC, DC, and IC? If you want to know what planet lines and astrocartography are and how to read them, you've come to the right place. I'm Kim Mott, and this is my playlist about all things astrocartography. If you're not familiar with the term, it is the astrology of place. For context, I'm a lifelong nomad. I've been moving since I was 9 months old. I've worked as a travel writer and the film and TV industry around the world for the past 2 decades, and I've lived in every time zone of the United States, several other countries, and have visited or worked in a total of 70 countries around the world, all while using astrocartography for myself and others. So astrocartography is an amazing astrological technique where you can actually take your own personal natal birth chart, the chart when you were born in astrology, and wrap it around the globe. You sort of superimpose it over the planet itself. The concept is way more technical and detailed than you might see on your average TikTok or YouTube channel. There are a few fantastic astrocartographers out there, but there are also a bunch of people who kind of have just seen the map and think it's so cool and then press record on a camera and start describing and explaining it without actually doing much research, I have to say. So, one of the biggest misconceptions is that the planet lines are lines. They do look like lines on a map, of course, but they're actually representing angles in your birth chart. When we're born, our natal birth chart in astrology shows us a snapshot of where the planets were at the exact moment and location of our birth. The location is very important because it shows where we can see outer space. We can't see all of space from Earth. Only a little window is visible, and astrologers call that window the ecliptic. The ecliptic starts in a birth chart in the east, rises and then sets and then goes all the way into the underworld where we can't see it until it gets back into the sky, that window of space. On a birth chart, there are going to be some key points. These are called the 4 angles. The ascendant, where the sun was rising on the eastern horizon of the ecliptic at the moment of your birth. The midheaven, the highest point in the sky that we can see from our little window here on Earth into space. And the descendant, where the sun will set in the west. I see Imum Chile. It's a Latin word for the bottom of heaven, and it's actually below the earth where you can't see, which represents your inner foundation. So those 4 angles, when an astrologer looks at your birth chart, we look at those angles very quickly to see where your most pronounced planets are going to be. Those angles, those are all the most prominent and important parts in a birth chart. So when people have placements where they have a planet right on their ascendant or right on their midheaven, that planet's going to be considered more active, more prominent, more intense in that person's life. If you have a planet that's in more of a quiet house and not on one of the angles, it may get activated during certain transits or progressions. But those that are on your angles are going to be more intense. So when you travel to one of these astrocartography lines, you're actually making that planet angular, actually intensifying the energy of that planet. You can't ever outrun your birth chart. You will always experience your birth chart as you, but when you do relocate to another location, whether it's temporarily, permanently, for a few years, whatnot, you are actually making that planet angular and more intense as far as the way you're going to experience it. So keeping that in mind is fundamentally important for understanding astrocartography. And the angle that you're going to is extremely important. Just like the understanding that it is an angle, the theme of that angle is important to know as well. The AC represents personality, self-expression, new beginnings, the way that you project yourself out in the world. The MC represents career, public life, achievements, things like that. Very public. The DC represents relationships, friendships, romantic partnerships, the type of people you'll attract to yourself and the way others see you. The IC represents your inner foundations and also your home itself and where you live. It represents parents and also your ancestry. The second thing that's really important to know is that because, like I said, you can't ever outrun your birth chart, you're going to really need to look at your relocated chart, which is when we just cast a new chart in the location where you're going to be visiting or living, and compare it with your birth chart just to see those differences. Also, to see what aspects you have in your natal chart that might be aspecting those planets that you're traveling to. Let's say everyone online is telling you to run to your sun line or run to your Jupiter line. Well, that's great. What if your sun is squaring Pluto and conjuncting Mars, which is also squaring Pluto, and Pluto's conjuncting your midheaven? You may experience going to a sun line as an extremely intense, maybe life-changing experience. And if you don't approach it consciously and with a lot of intention, it might actually be a very difficult, life-changing experience for you. So it's very wise to actually research what you're looking at with this map in a careful way, or to book a reading with a professional who knows how to suss this out and has experience and has observed experience with others on these different lines to see how things might manifest. Because everything is really up to your consciousness as well. How far have you evolved yourself so far in this lifetime? I've gone to certain lines on my map and had a terrible experience. And then, maybe a decade later, after I go there more consciously, more intentionally, have the opposite experience. I have fantastic, because now I know how to channel that energy. So when you are intensifying the energy of one of those planets, you are going to need to know how to channel that energy. If you go to a Mars line, you're going to need to know how to use that martial energy. So maybe you should go for a sports competition, or maybe go with very clear career goals and ambitions that you're trying to achieve while you're there. If you just go there idly and you're not, exercising regularly or somehow getting that energy out of you and channeling it, and I don't mean channeling like in a woo-woo way, I mean like using that energy in a positive way. If you don't do that intentionally, you will experience it unintentionally. It won't just go unexperienced or unnoticed. Like Carl Jung said, anything that stays in the shadow or unconscious is actually going to be reflected to you externally. And that's the same exact principle that goes on here. If you're not recognizing that energy, and especially if it's a shadowed planet in your chart, something you haven't worked with and made conscious and figured out how to work with, maybe you're suppressing that type of energy in your life. Saturn, Mars, Pluto, these are very common planets to do. Even Venus can be a shadowed planet. I have an entire post on my website, and I'll have a video soon about shadowed planets, so keep that in mind as well. If you're going to that location and your planet is shadowed, you will experience external circumstances because your ego hasn't integrated it yet. And so the universe will reflect that back to you so you can see that energy. Okay, so what are planetary lines? Planetary lines on your astrocartography map come from your unique birth chart. Like I said, it's overlaid on the globe, and it helps to imagine it as a 3D situation because we are on a sphere, we're on a globe, and so if you're looking at the flat map, it's easy to think, oh, like why are all these lines like so curvy and stuff? Well, that's because of the curvature of the Earth. So when you're thinking about your map, try to think of it as a globe. And when we're trying to understand what those planet lines are doing, what it means, what is a line, right? And to really understand how the planetary lines affect us, we can think of a total solar eclipse. So if you've ever been in the path of totality for a solar eclipse, you would have been able to see the full eclipse of the sun because of where you were located. It's the same principle in astrocartography with the planet lines. In the path of totality, day became night because you were located within the umbra, or the shadow, of the moon. If you'd been 50 miles outside the umbra, you still would have seen a partial eclipse, but nothing as powerful as a total eclipse. 100 miles away, you would have seen a partial a little bit, and 500 miles away, you would have barely noticed anything, but maybe you would have got a glimpse. More than 500 miles away, you would have only seen the eclipse on the news or social media, just like everyone else. And it's really similar with those astrocartography planet lines. If you want to have that totality experience or really get the most powerful effects of moving to that angle in your chart, you're going to need to be right in the path of that planet line. So the closer you are to the exact degree of one of these planetary lines, the more strongly it'll throw its shade and affect you personally. Whether you experience that as a good or bad thing, again, is up to your own level of consciousness and how aware you are of it and how intentionally you work with that energy. And of course, our own levels of self-development are always changing. So like I said, you can maybe go there at one point in time, maybe you're experiencing a transit or you have a certain progression in your birth chart. Again, you always have to reference your birth chart. And if you're like, oh, okay, great, some of the lines I want to go to are out in the middle of the ocean, what do I do? Well, keep in mind that analogy of the solar eclipse where it does still have effect for up to hundreds of miles away. So that's one way to deal with it. Another thing to look for is just zoom in a little bit. You might be a little surprised. My Jupiter midheaven is almost all ocean, but it actually runs right through Fiji. And indeed, I did get a gig working in Fiji once, and it was amazing. We stayed at these really 5-star resorts while filming them and things for an advertisement. So you never know what can happen on a little island out in the middle of the ocean. And I was careful to collect some amazing souvenirs from Fiji, including different types of jewelry, things like that. So when I want to activate that Jupiter midheaven, I can remotely focus on it. Remote activation is a whole nother school of thought. I will do a separate video on it, but just quickly what it means is, like, let's say your line is running, through an ocean near some remote island, or running through a very dangerous part of Earth, or something where a war is going on, or something that makes you not want to travel there, or maybe you can't travel for whatever reason. You can remotely activate that location. Again, through maybe watching YouTube videos. You can think about that culture and language, learn some of the words and phrases in that language, listen to their folk music, think about recipes that come from that area, cook them, eat them, different things like that. You can actually start feeling that energy in your life and noticing that sort of thing happening remotely. Again, you exist everywhere on the globe at all times. It's kind of like that movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. We'll do separate videos on the interpretations because there are 4 lines for each planet, and if you're using Chiron and moon nodes like I am, that is 48 lines. So this would be like a 3-hour video if I went through every single one. And those videos you see where people are trying to cover every line are usually a little anemic because they aren't really covering the 4 angles or even what that means. This playlist will also have interpretations for every planet and every planet line, so all 48. If you don't find it in the playlist right away, do check my website, kimmott.com. They are already on the website, but I am uploading videos regularly, so be sure to subscribe if you want to stay up to date. Okay, but we will check out some of those planet lines, how they've played out for different celebrities right now. If I just show you my astrocartography map and tell you stories, you're going to have to take my word for it. But if I show you, the map of Elon Musk or Kim Kardashian, we can all agree, yes, these certain things are kind of true about that person, and these things have happened to them at that time in that specific place. So it's a really nice way to illustrate it. Whether you love or hate these people, they're still good examples as a map because we all kind of know certain things that have happened. We'll start with the late, the great David Bowie. Rock star, world famous, amazing, very influential, born in London, lived throughout the globe, made albums in different parts of the globe. So let's check out Bowie's map. I'm using astro.com just because it's free for everyone. So if you don't have professional software, you can replicate what I'm doing here. You're going to see all the symbols for all the planets. If you're not familiar with the symbols for the planets and their significations or their meanings, what they mean, that's something you're going to have to get familiar with to be able to read your astrocartography map. That's just kind of like Astrology 101. There's plenty of resources online, but also I do have on my website an entire, interpretation list of every planet line. So you can find those there. And there's a lot of, visuals there with the symbols, or just screenshot this right here. Okay, so we're jumping into David Bowie's map here. Whenever you see this little crosshatch red symbol, that means their birthplace. So it's going to appear differently depending on their birth chart, how these lines are running. If we zoom in here, we can start just kind of like checking out on the map where he was born and what lines were very close. So if we remember that path of totality sort of analogy, this is dead center on to this line right here, which is the Venus MC line, so the Venus midheaven. He was born right on a Venus MC. Venus, it represents music and the arts and beauty and aesthetics. It rules fashion and also values. It can bring wealth. So that Venus MC line would almost guarantee that he's going to have an interest in those things, and that he possibly has talents in those areas. So we also notice this line running pretty close as well, and that's the Saturn descendant line. As you might remember from earlier in the video, the descendant represents relationships, the people that we attract to us, that sort of thing. So Saturn, being the planet of restriction, the planet of testing you, the planet of mastery and authority, it rules the 10th house of career. Having people like that in his life would maybe be sort of a theme when he's near his birthplace. I know that he did go to a school with a lot of rules and that sort of thing. And so maybe, he experienced that at school. I'm not sure that his family was very authoritarian, but that is something that would happen in that area. What's also interesting is that line runs right through Paris, so he might have something like that happen to him there. I do know that he actually also proposed to his wife, which is obviously a relationship, right on this Saturn descendant line in Paris. And so we do actually, as astrologers, notice that oftentimes Saturn in your chart can signify permanence, and so permanently sealing the deal here in Paris might have been something that he was drawn to as well. Okay, so he also very famously made some albums here in Berlin, which is not far from this descending moon sign. So he would attract a lot of very moony people. The moon represents your emotions, your instincts, sort of all of the inside stuff. The sun is your outside stuff, the moon is your inside stuff. And so in Berlin, he would have had that really, really activated in his chart because, like we discussed, this is an angular moon. Now, one thing to be noting here is I've actually adjusted his birth time by 5 minutes because I use astrocartography a lot for what we call chart rectification, and it's if you don't know a person's exact birth time. His birth time is estimated from memory to be at 9 a.m. Anytime you see a perfectly round number like 9 a.m., it is probably incorrect. And so I've noticed that using astrocartography and their AstroMap can actually place a whole bunch of certain events. And I'm going to do a whole series called Star Maps where I actually go into more of detail on Bowie's chart here and what happened in all these locations. If I shift it to 9 a.m., it doesn't change this map that much, but this just lines up so perfectly with events in his life that it's like, okay, his birth time was probably actually 8:55 a.m. Okay, so now let's bring him over to the US, because this is where he also really blew up internationally. He became very famous near his Venus midheaven line. But when he got over to the United States, that switched over to a different angle in his chart, and now it's the Venus ascending line. Right here, where like New York, Philadelphia, all these East Coast cities. And so he also got away from that Saturn line. He's now near a North Node line, which helps you with direction in life and where you're headed. He's also not that far from a Jupiter ascending line, which is going to be basically where he feels best on Earth. What's interesting about not only this line, but having these other two lines here and the absence of Saturn, which is more restricting, is that Bowie not retired, he never retired, but he lived out the end of his life here. He did a lot of work in New York City, and most people kind of considered him to have lived in New York City. But me, having lived in this area while Bowie was living there, I do know that he was actually in Woodstock for quite a number of years, which is almost exactly on this Venus ascending line. Probably would have been a place where he felt really good. What's also interesting is, remember we talked about birth chart aspects. here on astro.com, you can actually see different aspects that happen in the chart. And we'll notice that right here you have Mars trining and Sun trining because he's got a conjunction in his birth chart. His midheaven right through this same area. So work in New York would be very successful since the midheaven rules work and career. So he's got several other aspects, but just right where he ended up settling, right about here, is very, very, within range of these areas. Okay, so that's a quick look at Bowie's chart. We're going to go in a much deeper dive on a whole video on Bowie in the future on my Star Maps series. But as you can see, this is what his map looks like. It's unique to him because it's unique to his birth chart. Whenever you see, by the way, these circles on the map, that actually means the planet is in its zenith, or its most powerful point at that spot. And when you see 3 of them right here, this pretty close to each other, this would have been an extremely powerful area for him. So if he ever went to like Baja, he would have had a tremendous amount of energy there. With Moon on midheaven, that would be a lot to do with career and emotions, especially with Saturn on the midheaven there. Not sure if he ever visited there, but boy, he sure would have felt it if he did. The other thing to notice, because this is a great example, is where you see these crossings. So you see the X shape right here. That means these planet lines are crossing. I'm going to turn off these aspects just to make it a little clearer, because these are the actual angles in his chart, the planetary lines that are representing angles. He's got this crossing right here. So anywhere this happens, it actually creates a latitudinal line. So right in this latitude, which looks like it's maybe, 23 degrees of latitude, all the way around the globe. Actually, sorry, I'm down here. So this is actually about a little like 19 degrees latitude right here. So all along this latitude of about 19 degrees, throughout the circumference of the globe, he's going to feel this energy. We call that a Paran. So if he's like on the other side of the globe exactly, right at this 19 degrees of latitude, this energy is going to be present. It won't be as strong as when he's on the actual line, but it will be noticeable. So those are called Parans. That's something else that we have to look for. Astro.com doesn't show them, but if you click on it, there's little interpretations on the website here. I do tend to take these with a grain of salt just because they're not taking into account anything else that's going on when you click on that spot. And you, again, have to be referencing your birth chart and other things. So it's important not to completely take this for, Bible. We do notice over here in the ocean, like I was talking about earlier, sometimes you'll have lines running through the ocean, and that doesn't mean it's completely non-usable energy. That's actually not very far off of the coast of Los Angeles. So he's got this midheaven moon in Los Angeles where he spent a lot of time, and he's got this sun and Mars ascending. This is actually where this is actually where he met his wife, the love of his life, right near a moon line, and not too far away from this. So if you do see your lines kind of off the coast, just know that here's the scale down here. This is 200 miles. This is, still within range. It's not going to be as strong as if the line was going, right through this area, but it's still within range of the influence. If we remember that analogy with the solar eclipse. Of course, he would have felt it much more strongly up here in like the Yukon or wherever this is in Canada. And again, this is going around the entire globe, so you're going to start seeing these curved lines. Okay, so that's Bowie. Let's move on. There's another thing I just wanted to quickly reference. I'm not going to show it for every single person, but there's this other school of thought called local space, and it's all based on your birthplace, and it's almost like feng shui of planet lines. And so you can also take these local space lines into account, which I definitely do, but for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to interpret those for everybody's chart. Okay, next up, Elon Musk. Love him or hate him, he is very influential all around the world. Born in South Africa, famously transported himself to the United States. Let's have a look. We've got his chart here, which is very different from Bowie's. As you can see, there's not a whole bunch of, similarities here. He's got completely different planets in different places on his lines. We can see his birthplace here, He was born in Pretoria, South Africa. So we're going to zoom in there to see what energy he had going on near his birthplace. He has his Mercury ascending line right here, so that means that's kind of conjuncting his ascendant at the time of his birth. Mercury was. I also have Mercury conjuncting my ascendant, so I have a line similar to this. Mercury is the planet of intellect. It's the thought planet. It's also communication and ideas. It's the messenger. It has to do with short travels and short trips, things like that, and siblings as well. So that line is very, very close to his birthplace. He also did spend time down here in Durban, according to an interview with his mom that I saw on a little documentary that I watched to prep for this. So that's kind of interesting because it kind of stays right on that line. His dad lived in Johannesburg, which is not far from here. He spent time there as well. His mom says that he moved to his dad's basically to take advantage of reading the collection of encyclopedias that was there, which, you know, definitely is a Mercury theme thing to do. He's got his ascending sun line over here, not too far from his Mercury line, and then he's got a Chiron MC line here. Again, if you go to the website, all of these are here. This is Uranus, I see. Uranus, I've looked at a lot of inventors' charts, and it is a very prominent placement in most inventors' charts, Uranus is. So those are the closest energies to his birthplace. As we know, he famously relocated himself over to the United States. Actually, he started off in Canada. So, you know, he came right over to where he would feel very at home, the sun on the IC. Spent time in Canada and then relocated to this crossing area here. It's really interesting to see how people just instinctively get attracted to some of these lines. It's like their soul is magnetized toward it. You can see his Jupiter midheaven here. This would bring great career success, luck with finances. Jupiter midheaven is where I would recommend anyone to go to expand their career. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, whereas Saturn here is the planet of constriction. So it's almost like he's got, you know, 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, or 1 step forward and 3 steps back right here. That would be kind of a theme for him in this area. And also Saturn would be enhanced because it's crossing here with his North Node ascending. Again, I mentioned that on Bowie's chart as well, which his was over off the coast of New York. Here, right near Los Angeles, Elon Musk's North Node is crossing Saturn and Neptune. So that's big energy for him right there. Neptune is the planet of imagination, illusions, sometimes deception. It can also be like the oneness with all that is. Neptune also could make you attracted to using psychedelics or drugs or alcoholism as a crutch for emotional issues. So that would be maybe something that would be attractive to Elon in this area, because as you can see, he's very close to all of these lines. Remembering that we have Jupiter off here to the side, not too far away, which expands everything. So all of this energy is getting that Jupiter boost as well. So that's really interesting. I will do another fully in-depth video on him. He's also got this ascending Mars here, not too far, he's within range. So that's a lot of energy that he has going on in that LA area and all through California and the west coast of the United States. Really quickly before we leave his chart, I just wanted to notice that his Venus IC, it was running right through the center of Texas, which is actually not too far from where he has a SpaceX launch pad. And he's also got some Tesla manufacturing going on here in Texas. So he was attracted to this Venus line in that area. It's always really amazing to me when people, like someone born in Pretoria, South Africa, gets magnetized to very specific lines that have very specific themes that he's experiencing. Okay, Elon, there's so much more to it, you know, with these crossings, these zeniths, the parens, the ones I was telling you, these latitude lines, and then also, of course, the local space lines that have another thing to say or two. So that in combination with birth chart and transits and progressions can get pretty confusing if you're not familiar, but hopefully this is a nice overview for you. Leave me a comment if you have somebody you want to see their astrocartography map, and I will do a reading on their map. Or tell me about your experiences on planet lines. I'd love to hear about them. I'm always fascinated. That's it for this video. Happy astro travels. See you next time.